Warning: to avoid slanderous statements being made or unconstitutional censorship of this channel, I have to state that what you're about to hear is an opinion based on my own research or experiences, and although you may not agree with it, my opinion and the right to express it are both protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Some of what you are about to hear may be unsettling, inflammatory, disturbing, or outright shocking. I'm a firm believer of independent thought, now referred to as dissent, and am considered politically incorrect. Because I may also speak without a filter, listener discretion is strongly advised. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please hit that like and subscribe button below to receive notifications of new posted content and help support the growth of this channel. This is Samuel Storm Callahan, and welcome. You are now in the eye of the storm. So tonight I want to talk about another one of Kamala Harris's many lies. This one being where she keeps saying that if she is elected president of the United States, she's going to go after all the big drug companies who have, quote unquote, been ripping us off. Well, let's take a look at what's going on with these drug companies, because a lot of people don't understand how this process actually works. It can take many, many, many years and billions of dollars to develop a new drug. Just the trial period on a drug can take a ridiculous amount of time, okay? They have to test the effectiveness of the drug, but they also have to assess any side effects. And they have to try to determine the severity of the side effects, because let's face it, folks, the same drugs don't work in everyone, and not everyone has the same side effects. So it is a painstaking process. And then they have to weigh the benefits of the drug versus the side effects to see if, hey, is this thing even worth bringing to market? Is it going to do more harm than good? And once it's gone through all of the research and development, and they've gone through all the clinical trials and everything like that, and they decide that they want to try to put the drug on the market, then they can apply for a patent. Now, if a company can get a patent and get their drug into production, a timer of sorts kind of starts running. Whereas other products, when the patent starts to expire, they can renew it at a higher cost for a period of time. But drug companies aren't allowed to do that. So a pharmaceutical company that has invested billions and billions of dollars into developing a drug only has 5 years to recover their R&D cost, in addition to the cost of manufacturing and distributing the drug. Because what happens at the end of the 5 years when that patent runs out, any drug company can get that formula and produce it under a generic label. And they can do this at a lower cost because they did not have any of that R&D cost. So then the company that did put in all that R&D cost has to compete with someone who didn't. And of course you have these people that are going to insist on the actual brand, the original. It's been tested, it's been proven. For some reason they think because it has the brand name on it, it's better. It's not, folks. It's the exact same formula. It's just the other companies are charging less because they didn't have the R&D cost involved. And someone else asked the question, why drugs are so much more expensive in the United States than they are in other countries? Well, it's simply this. In a lot of these other countries, you can't sue a drug company because one of the side effects is it makes your butt itch. I mean, folks, let's be real. They have to pad their prices to some degree to cover the ridiculous lawsuits that they know they're eventually going to get hit with, okay? Medications in general are dangerous to some degree. They all have a bad effect on the body. Whether you notice it or not, they're going to have a negative effect. Some of it is mild and some of it can be severe. It's that simple. And the same drugs don't work for everyone. Now let's face it, folks, some of these drugs have really, really bad side effects. And in some cases, these side effects are the type that were either known or should have been known to the pharmaceutical company when it was put on the market. Take the opioid epidemic, for example. The way that was marketed, in my opinion, was criminal. Not to mention the way the drug was prescribed and used in itself. So yes, all those lawsuits are justified. But to be honest, folks, some people need to share some responsibility for that, because you were taking opium, for God's sake. What did you think was going to happen? Now, folks, even though the topic of this audio clip is to focus on Kamala Harris's lie about going after the drug companies who are ripping us off, we kind of need to discuss COVID-19 for a minute. Now, we've been dealing with the COVID-19 virus for 4 years now, and it's constantly mutating. Of course, that's thanks to the gain of function research that someone here in the United States was disgusting enough to fund, which has created problems throughout the entire world. Now, folks, let me be clear. The reason why gain-of-function research on a contagion is illegal is because the use of bioweapons is illegal. And the only reason why you would engage in gain-of-function research on a contagion is for the purpose of weaponization. And as far as I'm concerned, whoever is responsible for that is a bioterrorist. Okay? Now, folks, before you say we would never do something like that, let me just remind everyone that we have been involved in germ warfare ever since the days of the colonials when the settlers gave the Native Americans blankets that were tainted with smallpox. Anyone who funded the development of COVID-19 should be tried and convicted of murder for each and every person that died from it. Okay? And I say legitimately died because let's be honest, the numbers were skewed. They were paid a 25% premium for every person that they said died of COVID. So the number of people who died from flu, heart attacks, strokes, pneumonia, basically all the ailments that normally kill people in a given year, all those numbers dropped significantly because COVID was killing people instead. Why did they say that? Because they were getting that 25% bonus to say that COVID is what killed them. But I personally know 3 people who all legitimately died of COVID within a 2 or 3 month period. And only one of these guys had a high risk as far as I knew about. I mean, he was like 90 years old. So yeah, he was high risk. But the other 2 guys were in pretty good health. It just hit them really, really hard. Now, my first suspected experience with COVID was in, I believe it was March of 2020. I had a headache, insanely sore throat, and whatever the infection was, it was affecting my lungs in a very bad way. So I ended up going to the doctor, and I said, look, I said, I think I may have COVID. And the doctor just looks at me and she says, sir, you don't have COVID. Well, how do you know I don't have COVID? Well, first of all, sir, you don't fit the profile of someone who would have COVID. Okay, to me, that was about as stupid of a statement as you could make. That was like back in the 1980s when they say the AIDS only affected gay people. That is insane, okay? The virus doesn't really care who you are as long as you're a warm body and a warm host for it to invade and inhabit and ravage, okay? That's all it cares about. But when I explained my symptoms to her, she said, well, you have a history of respiratory problems. Well, yes, I'm aware of that. That's why I came in here. I know this isn't a normal respiratory infection that I would get. This is something different. And she said, well, sir, I'm not going to have you tested for COVID-19. And so I asked why not. And at that time, I was working in South Carolina. And South Carolina DHEC, which is Department of Health and Environmental, whatever, they were the only ones that actually administered the COVID-19 test. And if they called Columbia, South Carolina, and told them they had a suspected COVID case, then, as she explained it to me, the entire doctor's office would be quarantined until such time that they could send officials from Columbia to test everyone in the doctor's office and wait for the results to come back. And she said it could take days for those results to come back. She said, so you understand this, sir. If we request a COVID test for you, we're going to be quarantined for days. So I'm telling you, sir, you don't have COVID. And she sent me home with some antibiotics for the typical respiratory infection that I would get. And I was actually home coughing up blood for the next 3 or 4 days. It was really, really bad, okay? Now, I did get over it, but I'll tell you, that cough lingered for at least a couple of months afterward. But I really want to remind everyone that in 2021, the Biden-Harris administration pretty much tried to throw the Constitution right out the window, which shouldn't really be any surprise, but they tried to force vaccinations on a national level, if you remember that. And I hope you remember all the court cases that got brought up because of that. A few federal judges told them you can't do that. But what they did do, at least for a short period of time, they threatened federal employees and contractors with losing their jobs if they didn't submit to vaccination. And they did this in an economy that they were systematically destroying. So these people that actually went and got vaccinated, they did it under duress, okay? And I don't know if you remember, but anybody that actually did get vaccinated had to sign this little piece of paper. And basically what that paper said was that the medication that you were about to be administered had not gone through the normal trial process and was not FDA approved. It was being administered under the emergency use authorization. Basically, you were the test subject. Here, we're going to inject you with this. Now sit here for a few minutes so we can see what it does to you. Now, I also want you to remember that Pfizer actually had a vaccine in 2020, but they didn't announce it until after the election in 2020. And it was after the election, after Biden and Harris took over, that you had the forced vaccination and nationwide Joe taxpayer test subject scenario. Donald J. Trump would have never stood for that. Now, recently, I had another bout with COVID 19, and it's one of the newer strains. It hit me pretty hard. It was really bad. What happened? On a Thursday afternoon, I started getting a headache. By Thursday night, I was getting a sore throat. By Friday, my sinuses were starting to get cloggy. By Friday night, my sinuses were almost completely clogged, and my throat felt really, really raw, and my head was absolutely pounding. By Saturday morning, I hadn't really got much sleep because it was so bad the night before. I started coughing, and by Saturday afternoon, it felt like somebody had put a air gun down my throat and had sandblasted the back of my throat. And I mean, I was coughing like crazy. I could not breathe. I had gone through an entire roll of toilet paper in the last 8 hours. That's actually what I use for nasal clean toilet paper. But it was rampant. I mean, it was terrible. So I went on my insurance company's website and they have this thing called MD Live. And so I scheduled an immediate appointment with a physician in the area. And within 10 minutes or so, they sent me a text saying that the doctor was online waiting for me to come on and talk to them about, my symptoms and my problem. So I went over all this information with the doctor that was on there. And she says, "Is there any way you can show me the back of your throat through your webcam?" So I got a flashlight and shine it. She said, "Ooh." She said, "So I'm going to prescribe the Paxlovid that you've asked for." And she said, "I'm also going to go ahead and write you a prescription for azithromycin." She said, "Because as you said in your medical history, you're probably going to get a secondary infection after the virus is gone. So I'm going to go ahead and give you that. But do not take them both at the same time." Apparently, Paxlovid has an extensive list of drug interactions, and some of those are really, really bad. She said, "Whatever you do, don't take any other medications while you're taking this Paxlovid." In fact, I even read you shouldn't even take vitamins while you're taking Paxlovid. She said, if you're not better after the 5 days that you're taking Paxlovid, it's 2 doses a day for 5 days. She said, wait a couple of days and then take the antibiotic that I prescribed, and hopefully that should finish knocking everything out. So I go to get this Paxlovid. It's a Pfizer product, and it's 10 doses. You get 10 blister packs, and each of these blister packs will have 2 different drugs in it. There will be 2 pills of this one drug and 1 pill of the other drug. And like I say, you just take this twice a day for 5 days. Now, I would suggest you make sure you're home and don't get too far from a toilet, and be prepared for something just absolutely disgusting to happen. I think the best way I could describe it is if you went into an inner city crack neighborhood and walked into one of those convenience stores with bars on the windows and walked up to the counter and you saw the grab a penny, take a penny bin right there next to the cash register, and you grabbed a handful of those dirty pennies and popped them in your mouth and started sucking on them. That's how bad the taste is in your mouth the entire time you're on this stuff, okay? Does it work? Oh, yeah. Within 24 hours of the time I started taking this stuff, it was already knocking the symptoms way down. But there's a caveat here. You have to start taking Paxlovid within 5 days of the onset of symptoms, or it might not work, okay? So if you think you've got COVID and you feel like you need the Paxlovid because you're a higher risk, you need to get it and start taking it as soon as possible. But again, be forewarned that there's a lot of interactions with the medication, so I would suggest you not take anything else. Now here's the kicker, okay? When I got this Paxlovid and the other prescription, they told me it was like $25.39. The 39 cents was for the Z-Pack, okay? The price of that stuff has come way down from when it first came out. But the 25 was my copay for the Paxlovid. But when I looked at the bill, it was $1,740 some odd dollars was the cash price for this Paxlovid. I'm like, that much for 10 doses? You gotta be kidding. So I actually went to my insurance company's website to see what was actually billed. And they actually billed my insurance company over $1,400. Now, of that 1,400 plus, they actually paid just under 1,200 and had me having to pay, I think it was like $210 out of pocket for this stuff, but they also ran it against Good RX, which brought it down to just 25 bucks, which isn't bad, but you look at what they just charged for 10 doses of a medication, okay? Now keep in mind what I said earlier. In my opinion, this was nothing more than a bioweapon, and you don't ever develop a bioweapon unless you also develop the antidote with it, because the purpose of a bioweapon is to take out your enemy. You have to ensure that your people are actually safe and aren't going to get sick from that bioweapon. So, in my opinion, this is probably something that they had already in development when COVID was released. Now, when I say they, let me be clear. I'm not referring to Pfizer, and I'm not referring to the Chinese for that matter. I'm referring to that treasonous piece of trash on our side of the pond, who I personally believe was responsible for funding the gain-of-function research on the coronavirus. But then I look at the back of the box, and this is where I got insult to injury, okay? The drug that makes up, I mentioned the blister would have 3 pills in it, right? And 2 of the pills were one drug, and then there was 1 pill of a different drug. Well, the 2 pills, that drug was made in China, where the virus was supposedly released to begin with. Kind of goes back to what I was saying about, you don't develop a bioweapon without developing the cure for it. Yeah, okay, kind of makes sense now, doesn't it? In the United States, when you create a problem and then present a solution to that problem that you're going to charge them money for or request favors or demands or whatever, we have a term for that. It's called racketeering, okay? That's when you create a problem and then you charge someone for the solution to the problem you created. It's called racketeering. Or at least I should say that is a form of racketeering. Now let's get back to other drug prices in general. In 2023, okay, I take an asthma medication, and there's a maintenance medication that I had been taking for a few years. And in 2023, one of those inhalers would cost $105. That was the cash price. Now, my out-of-pocket on it was nothing. Literally not 1 cent, because it was considered a maintenance drug and my insurance covered all of that. This year, my insurance company wouldn't cover it at all. I went to get my prescription refilled, and all they told me at that point was there's a problem with your insurance, and we're going to have to try to get it straightened out. She said, we've got to send some forms over to your doctor, and if your doctor signs off on it, then we can probably get your prescription filled. Well, a few weeks later, I still hadn't gotten my medication, so I made an inquiry, and they said, yeah, we're still waiting on that form to come back from the doctor. I said, what form are you talking about? Because I've been using this stuff for a while, and I've never had to get the doctor to sign off on any kind of a special form. She said, well, because of the cost of the drug, they're going to have to fill out a form explaining exactly why you need that specific drug to treat your asthma. Well, curiosity got the better of me, so I had to ask the question. And just how much is this medication? Last year, the cash price was $105, and it didn't cost me anything out of pocket, so how bad could it be, right? I can't remember the exact number the lady gave me, but it was over $6,400 for the generic form of one inhaler. One inhaler that was $105 the year before was now over $6,400. I was absolutely floored when she told me that. So then I had to ask the question. I said, well, just how much is the name brand? She said the name brand of that medication for one inhaler is over $27,000 for an asthma inhaler. You could go buy a brand new high-end pickup truck for 3 of those. That is insane. So my curiosity on that deepened, and I actually went to the DEA's website and pulled up the most recent data on how much a kilo of uncut Colombian cocaine would cost. And having seen that price, I actually did the math, and I sent my doctor an email. I told him what I just experienced at the pharmacy, and I said, this medication that I've been taking for years, if I were to try to buy a kilo of it, it would cost me $13.3 million, whereas a kilo of cocaine, pure uncut cocaine, is around 60 grand. I said, can you explain to me why my medication is 221 times the cost of cocaine? He didn't have an answer, so I started digging into it. Well, interesting what I found. As of January of 2024, the Biden-Harris administration put restrictions on some of these maintenance drugs, which drove the prices insanely high. And mine just happened to be one of the drugs on the list. Remember what I said a while ago about creating a problem and then offering a solution for it? Oh, if you vote for me, I'm going to go after the drug companies that are ripping you off. She caused the problem. Okay. Well, maybe she means it. Maybe she realizes, there's an issue and she's going to go after the drug companies. She's not. And I'm going to tell you why. Drug companies, they do gouge you on certain things, okay? Insulin is one, and I have an issue with that because I don't need the medication, but a lot of people do. There has never been a single drug company on the face of God's green earth that ever contributed a single cent to the research and development for synthetic insulin. It was developed and given to the world for free, okay? It cost about, I don't know, I think the numbers I saw depend on where you are, is between like $4 and $10 a vial to make. And they charge between $200 and $600 a vial for you to get it. That's not right, okay? Now, part of the reason why they do that is because that helps cover some of their losses on other drugs, and it helps fund research and development on stuff that they're working on. But another big part of that is just simple, pure greed, okay? Things like that people need that are a life and death drug that you didn't pay a dime to do the R&D on. You shouldn't be charging somebody and trying to profiteer off of other people's misery. That's immoral, okay? Now, Kamala says she's going after them. Now, let me explain why she's not going to do that, but I'm also going to explain why she thinks she can, okay? Now, I've been hearing people float around the term march-in rights, okay? Now, what they're referring to is in 1980, the Bayh-Dole Act was passed in Congress. That was actually backed by the then Senator Joe Biden, okay? Now, the intention of the Bayh-Dole Act was to ensure that government-funded research that ended up resulting in a patent being awarded, that the products or drugs or what have you were actually commercially available, that someone would actually produce them and get them on the market. The way that would work is the government would have the patent and they would grant exclusive license to somebody to produce this product. And if they didn't do it, then the government had march-in rights to go back in and take that patent authorization away from them and give it to someone else so that they could bring it to market. And I'm trying to explain this as simply as possible. But in the 44 years that have passed since the Bayh-Dole Act became law, the government has not once exercised march-in rights. And again, those could only be used under egregious circumstances, like say you developed a cure for cancer and you said, okay, here you go, you guys get to produce this product for the next so many years. And they don't do it because, and I seriously, I hate to say this, but I seriously doubt they actually would, because they don't get paid to cure you. They get paid to treat you. And if you're cured and there's nothing wrong with you, then they can't make any money off of you. So, I'm just throwing this out as an example. But what the Bayh-Dole Act does not cover is price controls. Now, in 2023, the Biden-Harris administration was actually trying to get price controls put in place through the Bayh-Dole Act. And they started pushing hard. But the problem is the Bayh-Dole Act specifically excluded price controls from being one of the factors that they could go in and exercise those march-in rights or whatever. They did that on purpose. And in fact, the courts have shot that down several times, saying, no, the Bayh-Dole Act does not allow for price controls. So that's probably what she's banking on, but it's not going to work because they've already tried it and failed. Again, she says she's going to go after the drug companies who are ripping us off, while at the same time, they're responsible for the restrictions that went into effect in January of this year, which drove the prices ridiculously high on some of the maintenance drugs in the first place. Create a problem and then offer a solution. Oh, vote for me and I'll solve the problem that I caused. Well, I'm just going to make this clear right now. Satan himself will be giving free ice skating lessons to disabled children in hell out of the kindness of his heart before Kamala Harris would ever get the benefit of my vote. You're listening to Samuel Storm Callahan.